Okay. Well, I just first question I have is I want to hear any questions anybody may have, after seeing this horrific movie and documentation of what the U.S. foreign policy has done in Central America and the Caribbean. So that would be my first question to everybody. Is there anything that you learned that you want to share and or ask a question about? If not, let's go to the first question we have here that you were supposed to have gotten. And
Juan, we
yes,
have Sabrina has a question.
okay.
Yeah. Sorry if you didn't see my hand. So the documentary chronicled the kind of the historical overview, and we know that even though Latin America may not be at the forefront of like the news when it comes to U.S. foreign policy, there's still active involvement in these countries. Do you feel like the ways that U.S. intelligence operations or like political endeavors have operated in the region have changed and evolved, or can we expect to see similar things occurring, especially with new administrations?
Well, for the new administration, first of all, you don't know what this guy's going to do. He says one thing one day, he says another the next. But there's a lot of things he'll be challenged on in the legal courts, of course. But I think that the policy towards Central America has not changed at all. Okay, in the sense that the last intervention that was more public was Hillary Clinton, who intervened in Honduras, overthrew the democratically elected president Zelaya, and they installed basically a drug dealer. Him and his brother were drug dealers, and so through the CIA, which is not accountable, has never been audited. Excuse me. We don't know what they're doing throughout the world, but this is a country that has been in war 93% of its existence, 247 years, 231 out of 249 years of existence. So we're an imperialist country who thinks we should dominate the world. And not only has it not changed in Central America, but as you know, what's going on right now in Gaza, which is the most horrific things that I have witnessed in my lifetime. Genocide of the Palestinian people. So no, it hasn't changed.
And then we have Adrian.
Adriana, it says you have your hand up. I'm not sure if you can hear us, but we're unable to hear you. Well, it seems like we lost Adrian. They might be joining us here in a bit. When they come back, we can have them the question in the chat, hopefully.
Any other questions for Juan before we start the questions that we have on our Word document?
Okay, well, I already answered number 2, the recent overthrow of Zelaya. And 3, the School of the Americas, where many of Latin American dictators like Somoza, Noriega, and others were trained. Does it still exist? I will answer the question for you, okay? It still exists, but it's no longer called the School of the Americas. It was shut down in 2000. And now it's known as Western Hemisphere Institute for Security Cooperation. In essence, it continues to train police and the military. and has been doing so in Israel, over the last 20 years. And so, yes, it still exists. And, it's something that obviously they got a lot of flack from the U.S. intervention all over the world that they had to change their name, apparently.
And Juan, we have one in the chat from Adrian. His question was, what is the most important thing that people can do in order to not lose progress in this era of hate?
The most important thing, my friend Adrian, is to get civically engaged. Okay, we can no longer sit, down and watch the news and say, "Oh my God, look at what happened." No, and it has to be of interest to you. I think there's three things that are really pressing right now, and that's the possibility of a nuclear holocaust. We're so close to that now. What's going on in the Middle East and Ukraine and Russia? Climate crisis. Multinational corporations do not care that they're contaminating the earth, the water, and the soil. They maybe get $100,000 fine for something they did wrong. They write a check and continue going on and doing their business. So getting civically engaged, I think, is the most important thing, especially now that we're in the era of fascism. And, there's a lot of reasons why we have Trump. To me, the Democratic Party did a lousy job in running their campaign. And, the thing is that, Biden had expressed that he would not run for office, and he did, given Kamala Harris, like 5 months, I think, to run her campaign. But there's a lot of people that did not vote as well because they felt, well, either party is going to continue the genocide in Gaza. So I'm not voting for either one. And I understand that mentality, but at the same time, it hurt, at least someone that could have been continuing the war, but, maybe had a better chance with somebody that didn't want to be a dictator like Mr. Trump wants to do. And so, voting is crucial. You need to express your opinion by your vote and what you support and what you don't support. So civic engagement is a priority, should be a priority for everybody.
Now we have Susie.
Thanks for muting me. Hi. When it comes to
Hello.
the climate right now, I think what really hurts the most is seeing our own people against us. How do you, and I think it's a lot to do is because Trump has sold a lot of the whole Christianity thing to people and the whole, the playing on people's beliefs, I think. And a lot of our Latinos tend to be very religious kind of guide. They guide themselves very through towards religion, and the beliefs that he preaches that he has supposedly. Um, so hearing a lot of our people, our Latino people, going, oh, it's great that he's doing this, and it's great that he's kicking all these people out. I mean, I feel like that is the most discouraging thing to hear our own people, support that. And when I think of civic duty, I think we're trying to convince the people who are against us, but a lot of it is within our community. How would you go about helping us or giving us tips on how to address that? Because that's the hardest for my family, at least.
Well, first of all, there's too much apathy, not only within the Latino community, but in general. Yeah, not too many people vote, to be honest with you. I'm not sure the percentage, but it's not that much. But the thing is that, changing people's mentality is very difficult. I mean, we start forming our way of thinking like already at the age of 2 and 3, like you heard earlier. Yeah. So, But educational events is one way to approach changing people's mentality. And that's kind of what I do right now in the area of policing. And that's why you see my sign, Changing Police Culture. And if people knew how many people died every year in the hands of police, you know, over the last 6-7 years, there's been an average of about 1,100 people dying. And out of those 1,100, only 30% were committing a serious violent crime or the potential existed for a serious violent crime. The rest were domestic violence calls, home checks. I saw a guy with a gun across the street, and traffic stops. And people shouldn't be dying for having an expired license tab or a broken tail light, like Walter Scott did in South Carolina. He had a warrant out for his arrest because he hadn't paid his ticket that he got when he first got stopped for that broken tail light. It's mostly poor people that can afford to do those things at times, and may not even have the time to go get it fixed. So, you know, they should be really addressing serious traffic violations like speeding or negligent driving or something going on inside a car, the guy's going all over the road. But it shouldn't be stopping people for broken taillight, expired tabs, or broken windshield or cracked windshield. So, and in fact, there's a bill right now in Olympia that's called the Traffic Safety Bill. But education on the fact that too many people die in the hands of police, and oftentimes, you know, they get away with it. A good example here in Tacoma about 3-4 years ago, Manny Ellis was killed by 3 Tacoma police officers. Well, they all got off. Nobody went to jail. The only recent victory we've had has been this year. Auburn police officer shot a young 26-year-old, I think it was Laotian, who was homeless, basically out in the street in front of the store. They got into a scuffle. The cop must have been losing because he pulled out his gun and shot him in the torso. As the guy went down to his knees, he point blank shot him in the forehead. So when people see that, you know, and he had already killed 2 people before, that was just the 3rd victim that he killed. So something has to change in a lot of ways. So my goal right now is basically trying to get people, community advocates, legislators, and law enforcement to come together and have a decent dialogue on how can we change the culture to save lives of community people as well as law enforcement. Because recently, law enforcement has also been targeted. You know, it started in Dallas, Texas, where 4 police officers were killed by a sniper. They had one also, I think it was either Reno or Vegas. And I think the latest one was in North Carolina. So there's more and more growing, disdain for law enforcement. And the problem we have in law enforcement, and I tell this to sheriffs and police chiefs all the time, your biggest problem is white supremacy in law enforcement. And as long as you cannot, monitor them some way or another, because they're the ones giving you all a bad name. As Sue Rohr, who used to be the executive director of the Washington Training Commission, where all cops go and get, certified to be a law enforcement officer, she says there's no such thing as a bad apple. It's a rotten culture. And it is. And so it has to be addressed. And white supremacy needs to be addressed. Take care of your cold, Susie.
I'm just getting enough of it.
Good. Anything else?
Thank you for answering that.
I think in the chat, Adrian had a question of what is the most important thing that people can do in order to not lose progress in this era of hate?
I think that was already addressed.
Never mind. Just kidding.
No worries. But I did see Adrian put their hand up for a bit again, so I'm not sure if they have another question.
Well, I was just kind of thinking about um I was thinking about with this work, have we seen cops disciplined? Have they been fired? Have they managed to get away with it? How are the outcomes?
Well, the Jeff Nelson, police officer from Auburn Police Department, is the only one that has been basically sent to jail. He went to prison. But the guys that killed Manny Ellis, they're all, still around. And so it's a big problem because, police tend to stick together. I sometimes would venture to say they're a legalized gang. It's just like gang members on the streets. They're in it, they're covering their block, and this is my territory, and nobody else is going to come in here. Well, police think they are the ones in charge whenever they stop you. I'm the cop, you're not. And the mentality, if it's us against you, continues to be pervasive in law enforcement agencies. I think they forgot their so-called motto of serving and protecting. And that's a big problem. So it's a very difficult culture to change. But let me give you some examples of things that changed over the last 3-4 years. 2021, there was various bills that were passed to hold police accountable. And one was the creation of the Independent Office of Investigations. So this way, police will no longer investigate themselves and come up with a verdict that they were justified in doing what they did. The other is the Washington Commission on Training, where they all go to get trained. I've been there 2 or 3 meetings. About 20 people were on the commission board. All of them were cops or former cops. There was one woman who was a civilian, and I never saw her in attendance. But now, because of a bill passed in 2021, there's 10 members on that commission that are civilian. I mean, cops are supposed to serve and protect us. Why shouldn't then we be on the board deciding how you're going to do that? Makes a lot of sense. Also, that same legislation included where if a police officer gets decertified because he got fired for his misconduct, whatever it was, he can no longer apply for a job in the state of Washington. Okay. The use of deadly force, another big bill, neck restraints, chokeholds, tear gas, batons. I mean, demilitarizing the police is very important, and some of that has started to happen. Although I just sent a photo of Linwood Police Department that looks like a tank. Remember, military always gives police departments military equipment. And so it's very difficult to hold them accountable. So anything else about our foreign policy?
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Of course.
I would just like, this is more like, I was wondering if there's any way to kind of target how police are trained. Because I remember learning about a bit about the issue with police brutality. And there is an issue is that there's a lot of police institutions that follow the teachings. They frequently invite this person as a speaker and build a curricula around his words, but essentially, I forget his name, unfortunately, but he is the one who's kind of responsible for the always escalate, always dominate, sort of police brutality, police training. And I was wondering if could there be efforts to try and target the way that police training is done? Nip the problem in the bud.
Well, I mean, that's what it's all about, is training, right? And obviously there's been training so-called on de-escalation, but we see so many killings by police all over the country on TV all the time, and we don't see any really de-escalation being practiced. Okay, the problem is, like I said again, white supremacy in law enforcement, and they do not care about what laws the state may pass, okay, to hold them accountable. And right now, there's a bill called the Attorney General's bill, basically, put it mildly. And what it does is clarifies the authority of the Attorney General to investigate law enforcement agencies and correction centers for misconduct or violating constitutional rights. So that's been a change that's we're pushing for right now, okay? Because, the Attorney General is basically the top cop, okay? So it's time that the top cop starts investigating the subordinates out there, doing the work out in the field. Another bill is called the Sheriff's Bill. And in essence, it's basically trying to, modernize, I guess you could say, how police are trained. And also that everybody who's going to be, a police officer, whether it's a police chief or a police officer, a sheriff or a town marshal, they all have standardized training that leads to professional standards and more accountability. A good part of that bill also addresses volunteers. I don't know if any of you remember or heard about what happened in the city of Snohomish in June of 2023, June of 2020, rather, where about 100 so-called vigilantes, extremists, took over the city of Snohomish, armed with AR-15s and AK-47s, supposedly there to protect city businesses from the Black Lives Matter protest. Well, not only were they carrying all these military weapons out there, widely open, but they were flying a Confederate flag down Main Street. So that's the kind of problem we have in our county. Washington State ranks 5th in the nation in white supremacy activity. And Snohomish County is number 1 in the state. So you could say we rank 5th in the nation in white supremacy activity. And that's why UNIDOS supported our current sheriff, Susie Johnson. Adam Fortney, who used to be the previous sheriff, was a self-proclaimed constitutional sheriff and allegedly a Proud Boy as well. Well, there's a constitutional sheriff movement going on in this country. Maybe 200 to 300 counties have constitutional sheriffs. They're not only anti-government, they're anti-immigrant. And the current sheriff of Connecticut County, Bob Songer, has publicly stated that he will be supporting ICE in collaborating to round up undocumented people. So even though we're a sanctuary state that prohibits police and ICE collaboration, it's nothing that's enforceable. Some do if they want to do their job the way they're supposed to do it and follow the policy, of being a sanctuary state. But those others, the white supremacists, they don't care. So changes are coming, but they're slow. And but we have to keep engaging ourselves at the policy level, and that's the state legislature in Olympia. And that's what UNIDOS has been doing for quite a while now, not only on police accountability, but also on white supremacy. We now have a 31-member task force that was appointed by the Attorney General, and I'm one of those members. And so if anybody knows or hears of anything related to white supremacy activity, please let me know. You can also go into my website and read. I have at least 12 op-eds, 6 on domestic terrorism and 6 on police accountability that have been printed by the Everett Herald. So if you go into unidos-snoco.org, You go to the media section of that website, you can see all the op-eds I've written on the issues, on the two issues.
And then Juan, we have another question from Susie.
Sorry. So to me personally, I feel like when it comes both to the police force and to the police force and to foreign policy, I feel like it's a lack of education, like you were saying earlier, because I know that, for example, yes, you had to go to law school to do, to get up there to be able to do this policies and whatnot, and you can become a police officer right after high school. I don't feel like they get any, like, they don't have any, I feel like there's a lack of education. I feel like if somebody's gonna be making these policies, if somebody's gonna be having be a police officer, having a gun, they should have at least a degree on something, and it has to be a degree like that includes history, that includes psychological stuff, that includes them understanding like what's it called when you say de-escalating, you know and for that you need to understand what the how to have empathy and how to have leadership. And I feel like we just throw these people in the streets with a gun and be like, here, you're supposed to protect everybody, right? They don't even understand the law. They should take some law classes. But same thing with the foreign policy. I feel like you have all these lawyers up there and all these people who are making all these policies that don't really. I feel like there's a lack of education of our politicians and of our police force. And I don't know if that's something that's been addressed or been put forward to give, to require some type of education level.
Well, a lot of other countries do have more requirements in education, and we don't, like you just stated. And that's a big issue because, you know, um, not only do we have the problem of white supremacy in law enforcement, we also have it in the military. 30% of people in the military are white supremacists. Okay. And I just had lunch with a former police officer from Seattle Police Department who's retired now about a month or so ago. And he told me that he believed at least 30% of law enforcement are white supremacists. So it's a big problem. And education is a big problem. And I have not yet seen anybody at the legislative level promote the requirement that they be having at least a BA degree. And also the problem that we have in law enforcement is that they like to hire military veterans. Okay. So if you're a white supremacist in the military, you want to be one in the community now by joining law enforcement. So it is a big problem, and that education is not a requirement that should be put into law. I didn't understand who was talking.
I don't know who was.
So if anybody's interested in, supporting bills in Olympia on holding police accountable, let me know, and I'll send you that information. What bills that you can go in and vote pro. Anybody else?
We do have Sabrina.
Yeah, I hope we're not going over time. I'm not sure if there's if this is like an open discussion or if we're gonna have another portion. But bringing it back to the foreign policy, it's been very alarming, the trend that we're seeing all across the continent of militarization of police, using a militarized police to go after civilian populations with the excuse to go after criminals or drug traffickers. And I have heard the term used recently, police populism. So politicians are getting popular with this rhetoric of being tough on crime, putting people in jails. Like the example of El Salvador with Bukele, that was seen as like a success story. And we see a lot of politicians trying to emulate that. And even Trump is kind of adjacent to that rhetoric. So it's really concerning seeing how widely it goes and how many countries it's affecting. and with the whole private prison system, that's a whole other can of worms. So I'm wondering, with the foreign policy, although there's been discussions on cutting foreign aid to different countries, I'm not too optimistic about the idea that the administration will cut specific military and security aid to certain countries. We've seen it, like they don't apply that criteria with Israel, for example. I'm wondering if there's still going to be a lot of funds going to, countries like Ecuador or Colombia or El Salvador to bolster what is essentially like corrupt and very harsh military and security systems. Wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, we have, I don't know, hundreds of military bases all over the world, okay? And we support those countries that are aligned with U.S. foreign policy, okay? Now, and this is why the history of this country has been to intervene. Anytime somebody from towards the left, or even somebody that is just marginally to the left, is targeted by this country. And you got to remember that, remember when you're in high school, they taught you about manifest destiny and the Monroe Doctrine. Well, people, and sometimes in policing, think they're still in the era of the slave patrol, and that's how policing started, right? Go round up my slaves, okay? And law enforcement also started more with sheriffs. Remember, they would get their posses, like they still do now. The guy in Clear Cat County has 150 members posse. And who are these posse members? Ranchers and farmers from the Yakima Valley. And but in terms of our foreign policy changing, I was at the National Democratic Convention, which I'm not a Democrat or a Republican, of course, but because I don't believe in either parties, to be honest with you. One is just a little bit better than the other, speaks a little bit better than the other. One doesn't care what he says, insults everybody, lies all the time. And that guy wants to be a dictator. And if we don't resist a lot of these things that he's trying to implement right now, he will be a dictator. They're already one MAGA guy, and it's already promoting that there'd be a possibility of having a third term for a president. Well, the only one that had a third term was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and but he's the one that basically credits himself for saving capitalism, because when 1 out of 4 people were out of a job, he created 12 million jobs. But what did he do? He taxed the rich, and it's the rich that are now in power. We have the oligarchs in power now. Okay, you got Elon Musk now pulling the shots, taking over the Treasury office and getting information about all of us, and with young people in their 20s. And so I don't think our foreign policy is going to change given what was coming down the road. And, we're losing in almost every war we've had in the last 50, 60 years. Vietnam, we lost the war there. We lost in Iraq. We lost in Afghanistan. And we're losing in Ukraine. And we're losing also in Gaza. But they don't want to talk about how we're losing in Gaza. And they don't want to talk about how we're losing in Ukraine. But as long as they keep pumping money into Israel and weapons, via weapons, I mean, they've been doing this since 1999, $3 billion a year going to Israel. Okay? And also to Egypt, because they were also a U.S. ally. So, if you don't abide by our laws or our foreign policy, then we're going to take you over. That's the mentality we have in this country. U.S. imperialism to the max.